So let us talk about what is going on tonight. Mike Zuranski used to be a student aide. And in the old days at COD, the student aide position was pretty much, do you drink coffee and can you make coffee? And he worked at Starbucks and he was a barista and it all worked out great. And then he started learning computer stuff and he became one of the leading geeks of College of DuPage Meteorology Next Lab. And we were able to kind of swing some work his way after he was my student aide for several years. And Chuck Courier from the COD IT department said, this is a program that does excellence, so we want to get to have the college support him. Mike worked for us for several years, and then he was taken away from me by Unidata. Now, Unidata is a consortium of universities and other research institutions. UCAR is that consortium. Unidata is the... You'll hear about Unidata coming up here. And he was taken over there to do some programming, and there's been a lot of changes since there. And now Mike's back, and he's begging for money with this little silver cup. So if you have a quarter, throw it in his jar. It's tin. I know. I didn't think it was tin. I think it's just somebody lied to you when they sold it to you for $1. Seriously, Mike is amazing at knowing the heartbeat of the community. He's technical in his ability to understand programming and systems administration. He is an excellent meteorologist, so he knows why we need this kind of information. And I think he's got a really good idea of how we're going to go forward into the future, as there's just lots of changes within the weather network of the United States. So Mike Zuranski is going to come and give a talk, Weather Data Distribution in the U.S. and Academia, Changing Paradigms. So Mike, have at it.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Zuranski. You might remember me from such shows as COD Next Lab, the guy behind the curtain, and NSF Unidata, their one and only data engineer. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about weather data, particularly how it pertains to our little corner of the industry, because we're a little bit different than some of the rest of the United States. We have kind of a lot to go over tonight, and Paul already wasted the first 15 minutes of my time slot. Thank you, Paul. And so I am going to be rushing through a very complicated technical topic. I'm hoping that everyone can kind of keep up, but it occurs to me this is a school, this is a classroom, we should start with a quiz. Let's take an acronym quiz. Start off with an easy one. NWS. What does NWS stand for? National Weather Service. I'd be worried if some of you here didn't get that. National Weather Service is, of course, the agency that we all know and love, and they have a bunch of WFOs. What are WFOs? Weather Forecasting Office. Weather Forecasting Office, that's right. There's 120 some odd offices scattered across our country, including some pretty remote locations like Alaska and Hawaii. So a WFO is a weather forecasting office, and that's where meteorologists issue warnings and other very important products. The National Weather Service sits underneath NOAA. What does NOAA stand for, everyone? What? No. NOAA stands for the National Organization for the Advancement of Acronyms. Who do you think sponsored the quiz? Yes, of course, NOAA sits underneath the Department of Commerce and is the parent organization for the National Weather Service, as well as several other offices you might know, like Storm Prediction Center, Weather Prediction Center, and so on. Those are not on the quiz, those are freebies. And meteorologists for the National Weather Service at WFOs use a piece of software called AWIPS. What does AWIPS stand for? Anyone? Oh, you might know it.
Someone else do it.
Who said it?
I didn't say it. Someone said advanced.
Well, somebody.
What? Advanced Weather Information Processing System.
Oh, you were so close.
Interactive.
Advanced Weather Interactive Processing System. I might challenge the word advanced, but this is the software that the Weather Service uses at every WFO. It is what they use to visualize data, receive data, and issue products, other data. So it's kind of important. This thing is big and it's practically an operating system. It's the only thing that these computers or workstations will run, and it is an all-encompassing suite of utilities to interrogate data. And there's one more acronym I've got on this part of the quiz. This is only part one. NFS.
Network file system.
You're not wrong, but you're also not right. NFS, anyone else? Need for National Science Foundation. I would have also accepted NASA Spaceflight. Those are a great group of people on YouTube. NFS. Oh, for the love of it.
Failed your own quiz.
I sure did. I sure did. That's a point off. This is what happens when you complete your PowerPoint at 2 in the morning before you give the presentation. National Science Foundation.
I did offer to help you.
You did. The National Science Foundation is NSF, and as the name implies, it's a national foundation that helps to fund science. There's large tie-in with government, and they sponsor an awful lot of things within academia, but not exclusively to academia. And they are a pretty important entity that we're going to be hearing a little bit about tonight because of the work that they have done. Okay, that was a lot of acronyms. We're going to be seeing more tonight. But I want to go back in time because to understand the changing paradigms that we're looking at today, we need to know how we got here. So let's turn the clock back to the mid-1980s. Does anybody remember what the internet looked like in the mid-1980s? Was there even? Not really. Not the way we know it today.
It's called DARPANET.
DARPANET. We had something akin to the internet back then, but I mean, I think we can all agree that it was in its infancy compared to today. Colleges and universities that got weather data had to do so more or less on their own, or there were a lot of institutions that had copper phone lines connecting them directly to a weather service office, weather forecasting office, and that's how they got data.
Through packet, right?
I'm sorry?
Through packet. Through packet data?
Sure. It's more or less just an idea of the technology level at the time, but it's also contingent on where your institution was, what WFO you were near, and if that was a service that could be implemented. We also had cutting-edge fax machines and die-fax printers. This was not exactly fast and not exactly organized. By the way, I'm doing something a little bit different. I have color-coded these slides because this is really a technical topic with a lot of hands in the bucket. So I'm trying to color code based on entity. So the Great National Weather Service modernization of the 1990s, the Great Modernization as I like to call it, this is where we had a lot of forecasting offices either get relocated or significantly overhauled, or maybe we built new ones. I actually think the total number went down in WFOs during the modernization, but this is largely in response to growing technologies. Radar, Doppler radar, no less. Automated surface observing system, satellite observations. We didn't exactly have GOES-R, but we certainly saw the writing on the wall. Our increase in data volume, numbers, and our data needs was growing exponentially. Copper phone lines aren't going to cut it anymore. And in fact, as the modernization was rolling out and a lot of those were relocated, those phone lines got ripped out, and who wants them back? Nobody. So, how do we move all of this data around? NOAA came up, not exclusively on them, but we came up with the Satellite Broadcast Network, or SBN, another acronym, also known as NOAAPort. I'm sure there's some subtle nuance that is NOAAPort's different than the SBN, but as far as I can tell, they effectively mean the same thing. So if you hear me interchange these terms, don't read into it too much. But NOAAPort is, I like to say, a service by NOAA for NOAA. What is it? Well, Weather Service has a couple of transmitter uplink sites on the East Coast, and they send weather data, a curated data set, up to a satellite in geostationary orbit that rebroadcasts all of that data back down to an unsuspecting Earth. Anybody in line of sight of that satellite can listen in on that transmission. It's in the clear, so anybody with the right hardware can get that data. Well, that's pretty neat. It's a primary means for the Weather Service to send data to WFOs to process into AWIPS. NOAAPort solved a pretty big problem because some of these offices, like I said, are pretty remote. It's hard to run a phone line all the way to Hawaii, and so satellite solved that problem and solved it pretty well. And it was fast for its time, 80 megabits per second, blazing fast. I actually don't know if that's as fast as it was back then. There's a hardware limitation of about 100 megabits per second. All the receivers have a 10100 network card in them, and after some overhead, it goes down to about 80. That's the hardware cap.
When the SBN first came online, it started out at 3 megabits per second.
Blazing fast! The service rolled out in the early 90s, and honestly, even 3 megabits per second in the early 90s, it's nothing to scoff at back then. However, there was a bar for entry, and it was the hardware. You need a 3-meter in diameter satellite dish, which most HOAs frowned upon putting in your front yard. This hardware at the time was also prohibitively expensive. Computing has gotten cheaper over time, but we still have to deal with a big frickin' dish. So not everyone can afford their own NOAAPort receive sites. Well, where we started to see these deployed, in addition to WFOs, is at a lot of colleges and universities, as well as in some places within the private sector. You have more money floating around there, and the colleges have that opportunity to tie into their local communities. So it makes sense if they become a data hub. Okay, we already started talking a little bit about this organization Unidata tonight. It's actually NSF Unidata. Why is it NSF Unidata? Because they remembered what that acronym was supposed to be. A couple of years ago, NSF passed a policy that says that the majority of your funding as an organization comes from the NSF. You have to prepend that to your title, so now we are NSF whoever. NSF Unidata. Just a sign of where the money comes from. It's a UCAR community program, UCP, another acronym, and technically it's the Unidata Program Center, UPC, another acronym, not the least bit confusing. This was established in 1984, so it's 41 years old, ask me how I know. And it was established and funded primarily by the NSF. And here's what happened. The writing was on the wall. Colleges and universities saw what was about to happen. NOAAPort wasn't really rolled out yet, but they knew that they were about to lose their data, and that's not good. So, UCAR stands for University Co-op for Atmospheric Research, another acronym. And 80-some member institutions at the time got together in Boulder, Colorado, and had a discussion. And Unidata was born out of that meeting. They are charged to provide data tools and services to the academic meteorological or geoscience communities. And this program was created to facilitate the transmission of weather data, imagery, and forecasts to all of us, to support universities' local interactive computing capabilities, and to improve data access for researchers and educators, and I would add students to that as well. This is an important organization, and they have been providing important services ever since. One of them is the IDD, the Internet Data Distribution. This is a data flow network hosted by Unidata. And I'm going to call it the Unidata IDD because you can have your own. But the Unidata IDD is the parent source. These days, most of the data comes from NOAAPort. NOAAPort has a healthy smattering of critical data. A lot of text products, pretty much all the text products, watches, warnings, all that good stuff. Satellite imagery, radar imagery, and some forecasting model data. Unidata has a NOAAPort receive dish. They actually have a couple. And so they get that data and insert it into the IDD and send it over the internet. Even in the 90s, with the limited bandwidth that the internet had back then, this was still a big deal. And you saw better internet at colleges and universities back then too. They had bigger pockets and they were community hubs. So this was a paradigm that was starting to take shape, and it was starting to look pretty good. Numerous participating sites. It's not just Unidata who is providing data into the IDD. There are a few other organizations that have NOAA port dishes that contribute as well. And then Unidata also adds supplemental data into the IDD, so it's not just that NOAA port feed. They do a lot of value add. And then the way this network operates, it allowed us to share a lot of this data among academia, among ourselves. If the IDD is a network, the LDM, Local Data Manager, is how you get on that network. It's a piece of software, runs in Linux command line, and it's developed and maintained by Unidata. The LDM is how you access the data on the IDD. Here's the cool part. It's a push service. This is a big deal. It's one thing if I check every 5 or 10 minutes for some forecasting model data, I can wait that long. I'm not sure I want to wait that long for a watch or a warning. So having that pushed to you in real time, big deal. The LDM is configured to act on that data when it arrives. What this means is that when data flows in, I have told the LDM what to do with it. Maybe it's going to save it, maybe it'll visualize it, or maybe it'll just send me an email to know it's there. I can configure this to get the data that I want and to do what I want with it when it arrives. Funny little detail you may not know. LDM is what drives the data of AWIPS. It's baked into the software. And yes, this is the LDM that was written and authored by Unidata. Funny thing, they would write Unidata support asking for help. Hey, we're setting up an LDM in the cloud and we're running into some complications. Or, hey, we're trying to set up a new process and these LDMs aren't playing nice with each other. They would write Unidata. They're the authors. Why shouldn't they? Because they're not funded to help NOAA. Unidata is funded to support academia. If you are a .edu, they will help you out to no end. If you are a .com, you can go away. It's not for companies. It's not for private industries, and that's all right. However, if you're a .gov, especially a NOAA.gov, well, we like those guys, right? We're not going to tell them to go away. We're going to help them out. But then they're kind of doing that out of pocket. It's a very interesting dichotomy. But this is what we have that I like to call the LDM paradigm. Data from NOAA port and other sources gets inserted into the IDD. This is what's known as a publisher, subscriber, or a pub-sub model. They're publishing data, and I am subscribing to some of it. And that data will then get pushed to me in real time. I don't have to subscribe to everything. There's a lot of data, and I don't want all of it. So I can get surgical with what I need. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. This is how we've gotten our data for a full generation. The mid-90s, carry the 2, it's been a while. And it's worked out pretty well. A little bit more about Unidata. They have a community governance model. There are 2 of them. There's the Users Committee, and then there's the Strategic Advisory Committee. UserCom, StratCom, or SAC if you want another acronym. And StratCom especially, it has representatives from a few different agencies that come in and give reports on the goings-on their side of the fence. Some from the Weather Service, some from NASA, some from USGS. I think there's 1 or 2 more maybe. And they meet twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring. I had no role to play in the scheduling of either that or this talk, so my hands are clean on this, but today's the first day of that joint committee meeting. UserCom met today, this afternoon. Tomorrow it's going to be a joint meeting with both committees, and then Friday is going to be StratCom. Talk about timing, right? Okay, so here's Scott Jacobs. Who's Scott Jacobs? He's one of those representatives, one of those liaisons from the Weather Service, and he comes to StratCom every 6 months, and he gives that status update. The NOAA update, he has a couple of titles. On one website I saw that he is the AWIPS system architect. This is coming from a PowerPoint that he gave at StratCom 1 year ago, almost to the date. And he's an AWIPS product improvement manager on that slide. Folks, you can think of Scott Jacobs as Mr. AWIPS. There's not much going on in that realm that he isn't intimately familiar with. He is sort of the top of that particular pyramid. And so on the 27th, almost a year ago, he gave a presentation, and I have a single heavily redacted slide from that talk. I'm going to go through this line by line because I think it's important that we listen to what Scott is trying to say. What happens to the SBN in the future? This was one slide out of about, I don't remember, 20 or so. And really, this is the only one that's fit to print here tonight. But starting off with a very good question. What happens to NOAAport as we evolve? Well, they're working on it. The Weather Service is moving towards hosting all operations in the cloud. Think anything AWIPS. He goes on to describe this in some technical detail later on. I'm not sure I care that much. It's important to know that it's happening. But the SBN at that time will no longer be required to deliver data to operational sites. Operational sites means WFOs and other NOAA agencies and centers and the like. We are not considered an operational site at the College of DuPage, even though we have a NOAA port receive site sitting in our backyard. Our HOA is okay with it. Now, the SBN is currently managed under the AWIPS contract with Raytheon. It's a small business, you probably haven't heard of them, but this has been the contract for not just the software, but also the network itself. They have some management to do with the bigger picture there as well. And that contract officially ends August 2027, just under 3 years from when he gave this presentation. Let's talk about this for just a second here, because this is the only hint that we really have of a timeline. A 1-month window, some number of years out, is when this contract ends. That's the only thing we know a timeline for right now. What's going to happen when that contract ends, though? Because he's starting to paint a picture I'm not sure I like. The intention when that contract ends is to remove all AWIPS hardware, including the SBN hardware, at the end of the contract. They're going to pull the servers out of the rack, and then they're going to go out drinking. This is something that the Weather Service has been looking forward to get out from under for a long time now. This service once really met our needs. It does not today. 80 megabits is not fast. Comcast is charging me a lot of money for quadruple those speeds, and I could get a lot faster if I wanted to pay for more. It's not hard to move data around the public internet anymore. In fact, a lot of people have already been doing this for a while. So it's interesting that he's talking about removing all of that hardware. That seems pretty definitive. And then he goes on to say the Weather Service will determine an alternate data delivery access method, and more information will be provided as decisions are made. In other words, SBN will no longer be sending data to WFOs. That service by NOAA for NOAA doesn't need it as much anymore. And we know that contract's going to end, and it sure seems like there's a tie between the end of SBN and the end of that contract. It sure seems like all of these things are intrinsically linked. This is small text. Now, I know about Scott's presentation because all of these materials are online on the Unidata websites. Sites, plural. They're in the process, they've been in the process of updating their website. They finally pulled the trigger, and so now they have an archived one where all of their old content is, a new one where they're, I think, still trying to get the layout of certain things just right. It is not easy to find this material, but I found it for us, so that's fine. These are extracts from the meeting summary after Scott gave his presentation. The first box here is really just a sum up of what we just saw. SBN and AWIPS moving to the cloud, bring users to data versus data to the users. More broadly, we're making NOAA data useful to end users. However, what's Unidata's way forward for staying engaged or not staying engaged in that way? Ooh, that's an interesting statement, isn't it? Scott reaffirms there's not a lot of info out here right now on this topic. What you see is basically all we're getting. And then this bottom box, there's a brief back and forth. Ethan, project manager at Unidata, he has his finger on the pulse of a lot of standards, a lot of technologies and techniques on how things move around, on how data gets defined. So he has his finger on the pulse of a lot of these things, and he's asking about it. How are some of these standards going to play in? Scott response, I don't know. We're prototyping some things. We're starting with bigger data sets, but there's not a lot of information right now. And then Jim, a committee member, plea for NOAA to support NSF Unidata, because when the Raytheon contract ends, is there space for financial support to help grow the next paradigm? Remember how I said AWIPS is running LDM under the hood? You want to know how much money Unidata is getting to support that? A big fat donut. It would be nice if they were getting funded to help maintain that paradigm, or even just support it when NOAA calls in asking questions. That hasn't happened, at least not in a while. And so they're asking, is there any way that we can make an official partnership, some kind of a relationship with NOAA so that we can get funded to do this? And Scott vaguely says, well, we're working on the contract after this one right now. Folks, this is a meeting summary, and it's really just a few sentences. So I'm not really sure what exactly was said in that room, but this is a pretty good indication that they understand what Scott just said. And then there's one last thing that I wanted to point out. Kevin, who is the SAC chair, do we have a direction for what we want to do about data visualization? He's asking kind of an unrelated question, but a good one. Mohan, the director of Unidata, believes that the cloud is where the world is headed. I'm curious, who here knows what the Science Gateway is? Victor doesn't count. The Science Gateway is a small cloud, a private cloud for educational use. I'm going to use the term Jetstream, specifically Jetstream 2. It's an academic cloud sponsored by NSF and I believe operated under Indiana University. And it's a cloud-based system. Unidata has some resources in there. It's great for spinning up instances of a few things. One of the best services they have, in my opinion, that use this, if you are running a class and you want to have Jupyter Hub installed so that your students can learn Python in the classroom with you, they will work with you to set up resources for your curriculum free of charge, because they get funding through grants to do that. I'm not sure the Science Gateway is where the world is headed. I'm not sure that's what Mohan meant when he said this either. But it is where the world is headed in general is the cloud. We saw that AWIPS is moving to the cloud, so this is a concern. Unidata also has end-user tools. They've been trying to squeeze a couple of things into the cloud, such as they have their own fork of AWIPS, and they're trying to put the front end of that into the Science Gateway, such that maybe you log into a remote desktop session and work with it that way. You don't have to install AWIPS yourself. That's a pain. You don't even have to move data around as much at that point, because that's a pain too. So what they've tried to do is put a remote desktop solution in this for that and a couple of other applications. And, well, I'll be frank, I don't really like that software on a good day. But a remote desktop connection seems like that's going to make things slow, add some complicating factors, and I don't know how well that's going to go. I can tell you I don't think that's what the Weather Service is doing. I don't think that's what the Weather Service means when they say they're moving to the cloud. But this is what Unidata has been doing for several years now, working in this environment. They have seen results. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Ryan is the deputy director of Unidata, and he had another comment. The end of the SBN moves us away from push data distribution. What? Are you kidding? No, it doesn't. If the SBN goes away, that particular push service might go away, but you can't tell me that we need to do away with a push service completely. I want my warnings fast, dagnabbit. So I'm not sure I completely agree with that take. And he's saying, yep, we got to focus on cloud-based storage. I agree. That's what Unidata's been doing that. By the way, did you know that Unidata maintains the S3 buckets for NOAA weather radar data? Free of charge. Yeah, they're not even getting paid to do that either, I don't think. So they've got a challenge here because we need to support a new generation, but we all love our legacy users who don't like change. We got to take care of them too. So this is a bit of a predicament for them. That was all of the intel I could find from Stratcom 1 year ago. So we're going to move up the timetable to April 23rd, 2025. Who remembers what the world looked like late April of this year? Was it a happy and stable place? No! Incoming presidential administration takes a big machete to a lot of federal agencies. NOAA and the Weather Service are not exempt. They lost staff, a lot of staff, and a lot of funding. Scott's presentation, I'm not even going to show it here because it was almost entirely, our guys are the best. They are doing everything they can. They are getting the job done. They are issuing products no matter what. They are committed, they are dedicated, and they are good at what they do. We've got a lot of changes. We've got a lot of funding concerns, and it's hitting everyone everywhere. Yeesh. So again, not a whole lot of talk from Scott on any of these topics tonight, but there is some back and forth as part of the dialogue. What we're looking at is the initial plan was to move AWIPS to the cloud 2028, somewhere in there. Now they're talking about speeding that up. Okay, we just went from slashing staff and funding to speeding up timetables. Oh, Mr. Krabs, I'm so confused. Is there a scenario where this accelerates and we have to build a new future in 6 months? Spoiler alert, it was about 6 months ago and we haven't done that yet, so the answer is no. But it's still a concern. We are looking to make things go faster. We're making the timelines go faster is what he means. But I don't think that can be done before 26. Even if the satellite falls out of the sky, they're going to have to figure out a way to keep that legacy paradigm going because they're not going to be ready all that fast. And then one last bit from Scott. From the AWIPS perspective, we no longer need NOAA port for the WFOs. He said that 6 months prior. From a larger perspective, we might want to keep that data flow going to non-WFOs. That's us! Ooh, okay. Hang on, wait. Now he's talking about maybe another Weather Service arm can take over the overhead of maintaining that data feed. All he knows is everyone seems to be on board with keeping the SBN around. Yeah, that's a different picture than I got from his previous presentation, just a little bit. Okay. Once again, this is the information that we have to work with. It's all available online, but we haven't really heard much about this topic from anybody. From Unidata, from the Weather Service. We have heard a couple of status updates recently, I'll get to that in a moment, but this is all the information that we've really heard. This topic is not being discussed too much right now. This is a complicated thing. So to summarize, the AWIPS contract is the only timeline we have, and that timeline says it's scheduled to end in August of 2027. Timing of that is somewhat uncertain, and the exact implications to the SBN are unclear. It sounds like, yeah, they want to get out from under it. It's expensive. It doesn't meet our needs of today anymore. But it's not easy to get out from under. And they know that they have to help their partners out with this somehow. But they don't seem to have an answer for that yet either. I don't know what's going to happen to the SBN in 2 years, but this isn't looking great. We know that the Weather Service is moving AWIPS into the cloud. In fact, the Weather Act Reauthorization Act, I'm not making that up, that's not a typo, that's really what they called it, even mentions moving AWIPS to the cloud. It's happening. And there's no clear tie-in for partners at this time. That being said, I expect there will be, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. Unidata has some challenges, it is fair to say. Most of them revolve around financial challenges, staffing challenges. They have a lot of current projects that they need to maintain. I used to work for Unidata, as Paul told you. I was there for just under 2 years, and then I left with 5 other people in the second round of layoffs. 6 of us in total. Some early retirement, some, like myself, just shown the door because they couldn't afford to keep us around. They have had some financial troubles. And it hasn't gotten much better since then. They also don't have clairvoyance. They don't know any better than we do what tomorrow is going to look like. And let's just sprinkle on some bacon bits of about a week or 2 after this particular committee meeting. They en masse were shown the door for about a month in May this year. They weren't even allowed to so much as check their emails, and when they did come back to work, not all of them returned. They've continued to lose staff since. If I could put one word to this whole thing, I would say uncertainty to describe our future. All right. I need some perspective here. Because when I run into a problem that gets complicated, has a lot of moving parts, it helps me if I take a few steps back and gain some perspective, look at the forest instead of the trees. I happen to know of an organization that has a global reach. I'm going to speak to NOAA's manager, I say. No, I'm not going to do that. But the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, is just what it sounds like. It's that organization that has a global reach. This is a one-line mission statement from their website, but really what it boils down to, what it matters for us here tonight, is they have a heavy hand in creating data standards and data flow standards. They are the reason why it doesn't matter what country's forecasting model data I download, if it's the US, Canada, the UK, Germany, Japan, wherever. It's all in the same file format. It can all be manipulated, read and written with the same tools. That's a big deal. So the WMO does a lot of standards. I wonder what they've been up to. It turns out that they've been cooking on WIS 2. What's WIS 2? Well, it's what comes after WIS 1, of course. I don't care about WIS 1. We're not here to talk about WIS 1 tonight. WIS 2 is the new hotness. And there's a lot of text here. This is all from their website. But really, the WMO is creating this new paradigm. And what this first paragraph here is saying is they understand that the needs of tomorrow, even really the needs of today, are demanding. There's a growing demand. High volume, high velocity, diverse data sets. That's a lot of buzzwords. What it means is that this is a big picture solution to a big picture problem. Unlike the GTS, because we need more acronyms, this is basically what WIS 1 is. Yes, they basically made a second acronym because they just wanted another one. I don't know. Don't read into it too much tonight. It is the current paradigm that, frankly, is several layers abstracted from what most of us in academia are familiar with. Unidata technology means that we don't have to worry about GTS or WIS 1. That's a thing, and people at NOAA have to worry about that, but we're not really exposed to it too much. So I'm not going to talk about that paradigm, but they are correct. It relies on private networks. The SBN is a private network. It's broadcast in the clear, but you have to have the right hardware to listen in. The IDD is a private network. It uses public internet tubes, but you still have to be accepted by the publisher in order to subscribe to that data feed. So WIS 2 leverages the public internet and employs a publish-subscribe model using some other acronym protocol, MQTT. We'll talk about that in a second. And this allows users to subscribe to specific topics and receive real-time data. Hang on here. Publish, subscribe, real-time. This is starting to sound a little familiar. And just as a side note, this particular paradigm officially became operational at the beginning of this year. It's not really driving anything in production right now for anybody. Right now, member organizations to the WMO are transitioning, starting to get used to this paradigm, starting to find what they'll use it for. But this paradigm is a thing, and it's supported. MQTT is the heart of this, and I'm really glossing over WIS2, guys. I got a timeline here. And so MQTT is used in a lot of other things here today. It's how I control my light bulbs. It's designed as an extremely lightweight pub-sub messaging protocol, and they give an example on this page of a thermometer reporting temperature to a broker. This broker is that point of centralization. It receives these messages from data providers, and then it will send them out to subscribers. So we have people on the right of this image that are subscribed to that particular data feed, and they're getting updates whenever that temperature reports. Don't read all of this text. It's a lot. They gave a pretty picture to help us. And all this is really saying is that I, as a data consumer, can subscribe to this WIS2 network and be alerted in real time when data is available. And that data is available on WIS2 nodes and global caches. When I get that message, it'll tell me where I can find the data that I need. And it's broken down into, first of all, they're called topics, MQTT, channels, feeds, whatever you want to call it. They're called topics. And this is just an example of a few strings that break out the topic. And you can see that there's a certain topology here. So at the beginning, you have origin, A, WIS2. It means things. And then we start to get a little bit more strategic here. We have agencies, and then we have, okay, we've got surface-based and then aviation. I can subscribe to one parent topic and get everything that's underneath, or I can get very surgical and just subscribe to the individual data sets that I want. And what will happen is I'll get a message when that data is available. It contains a link that I can go to and get that data itself, as well as a bunch of other metadata, things like the author, valid times, even security features to ensure authenticity. So this is all JSON payload, which is easy to work with. It's also another acronym. And it's just metadata. So we're pushing metadata around, information about the data, but we're not moving the data itself anymore. This is a piece of software, MQTT Explorer, and it's just a visual that allows you to interact with these services. And so, like I said, this is operational now. You can get this software, take a look at it, and play around with it. A lot of international organizations are starting to work with this. This is something that I let run for 5 or 10 minutes, and some of these agencies sent thousands of messages in that time. So anyone can get this software. Anyone can use these data feeds and play around with them. In fact, the WMO provides all sorts of training and WIS2 in a box. Think, here is a WIS2 node that you can deploy relatively quick and easy and get started now. There's a lot of training material on their website. So, what is the status of WIS2 at NOAA? Well, we have a global broker. It's one of several. The term global means there's several across the world. The Weather Service has theirs online. That's good. Here's the notice where that's available. There's another thing called a global cache. That's more of a data repository, less the real-time side. That's coming online in the coming days, in fact. Here's the announcement for that. And believe it or not, both of those statements have the wrong address in them. That's the right one. I don't know. I didn't write it. But you can play around with this right now. In the bigger picture, even though the US does have its broker online and is ramping up its implementation of this, there's not a whole lot of US data yet. Not everybody is organizing their topics in the same way. There's still some confusion there. And as far as I'm aware, none of this is driving anything in production. Breaking news! Today is that first day of the Fall Joint Committee meeting. And about a week ago, they put some materials online, the agenda for that meeting, as well as staff status reports. They talk about what the staff has been up to in the past 6 months, and that came online about a week ago. In fact, our man Scott, Mr. Awips himself, is speaking on Friday morning. Wish I could be a microwave in that room. So we're going to have to wait about a month until we hear how that meeting went, but we see some of the materials they've posted online, and check it out. They're talking about this. Ethan, that project manager at Unidata, I know that he's been having his finger on the pulse of WIS2 for a while, and recently they've actually been working with this. They got WIS2 in a box, and they started to take a look at what they could use it for, and the conclusion they reached is, we don't have a conclusion yet, further investigation is going to be required. I'll take it. They're looking at it. That's a good thing. In fact, it even has part of its own section. And so a review was conducted about WIS2 over at Unidata, and they were looking at what they could use it for, and they felt that it's not a viable replacement for the LDM. I agree, it's not. It's a metadata push service, not a data push service. But it would be a complementary paradigm in the short term. In fact, as time allows, they're going to work on some mechanism that blends these two together. That's exactly what I agree with, 100%. And it wouldn't even be that hard to do. They have a lot of small technical challenges to overcome, but they're certainly capable of that. And this would be a really good stopgap solution if when NOAA port goes away. So they're going to have to put some effort into this to get it done, but they also have some time. I was really, really, really pleased to see this news about a week ago. This has been a really interesting talk to write. Now, unfortunately, while that was also a lot of information, it's also all that we really know right now. In about a month, maybe we'll see what happened at Unidata this week and we'll know more. But there hasn't been much official communication about any of this, really. I threw a heck of a lot at you tonight of a very technical nature, and I see a lot of eyes glazing over. So I'm going to talk about an example of what I think we can use this for. I'm going to do a bit of a dream cast, and I'm going to try to be really quick about this. I'm not, but there's a project that I've been kicking around for a little while, pretty much only in my head. But it's AWIPS in the browser, because I firmly believe that we need to be in the browser more than we are. I think that we are about 10 to 15 years behind most other industries in terms of browser capabilities. In the year of our Kerbal, 2025, why are we not seeing more advanced visualization tools in the web? If you think about it, you develop something for the browser, it has ubiquity across devices. Ryan even said, we got to think about how we're going to involve tablets, because now we have crops of students who are more familiar with tablets than they are with computers. There's a problem to have. But now we can also tap into modern web-based tools. I'm going to show you an example of this in a second, but it opens the door to a lot of really cool things, is kind of the bottom line there. AWIPS in the browser could be powered by WIS2 so that we know when data becomes available. I could sit at my workstation and get a ping when a new warning is issued. And then let's get a little bit more clever. When it comes to moving data around, this client is going to receive some. Right? It'll get a WIS2 notification saying new data is available, maybe it's a model run, and it's going to go out and get some data. And it might do some processing to visualize it in the browser for you. Imagine this was a forecasting lab and all of you were sitting in front of a computer and Paul walks into class 5 minutes late and says, all right, let's look at the 12Z GFS for tomorrow's convective risk. You're all going to look at the same model, same set of forecast hours, and probably an 80 to 90% overlap in the products. Paul's going to pull up 2-meter temperature, and what are you all going to do? Pull up 2-meter temperature. Are you all going to get the data from the same place? I hope not. That's silly. He's already got it at the front of the room. Your workstations should be pulling that data from him, not NOAA. NOAA's barn doors are burning down because people want to get the data straight from NOAA, straight from the official source. Even though things like the Big Data Project and, ready for acronym inception? NOAA Open Data Dissemination, NODD, is kind of the new term for that NOAA Big Data Project. In short, we've been putting a lot of data into the 3 big cloud providers, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, for a good long while now. And why do you think the Weather Service is moving AWIPS to the cloud? They're moving their processing to be next to the data. That's a good idea. What if, as we're sharing this data around ourselves, we have a web app with some peer-to-peer data sharing technology baked into it? The more clients that come online now, we're starting to come up with our own mesh network. We're sharing data amongst ourselves. We don't have to burn the barn doors down anymore. And the more popular this service becomes, the more robust it becomes too. So it kind of goes back to, Well, we need to have a certain amount of eye candy, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about some technologies under the hood. I know I'm past time. I'm almost done. We can parse data directly in the browser. In fact, Tim Sapini, who works at the Storm Prediction Center, has figured out a way to do this. He compiles wgrib2, which is a standard command line utility in Linux, with WebAssembly, or WASM, another acronym. And now you have a web page that pulls its data directly from NSEP and visualizes it directly in the browser. You're not getting it from a college anymore. You're not getting pre-rendered imagery anymore. You're getting the data. And because it's being rendered in the browser, that gives the end user options in terms of styling, for example. We also have cloud-optimized data formats like ZAR. These open the door to working with really big data sets in better ways, more efficient ways. Breaks down those big, massive data sets into a way that's easy to work with in the cloud. We can leverage existing quality of life tools. Brian Blaylock, who, spoiler alert, is the 2025 NSF D'Souza awardee. I believe he's getting presented with that tomorrow, so nobody tell him. He has a handful of GitHub repositories that I think are pretty neat. Herbie is a way to get model data right from NSEP. Goes to Go is a way to get satellite data right from official sources. And these are Python repositories. And now you can work with this data easily, cleanly, with just a few lines of code. You don't have to be a software engineer for this anymore. Python is at a state where it too exists in the browser, or at least it can. So there's no reason why we can't leverage existing tools that make our lives easier. And some of this stuff is just too good to pass up. I gotta show you this. Last semester, one of our speakers, you may recall, was Roger Edwards from SPC. After that meeting, we took him out for pizza and beverages. Students, what do you do when a bona fide expert's in town and goes out for pizza and beverages? You join them. And then you ask them questions. We call this an opportunity. I asked him, has there ever been a data visualization technique that you wish you had but haven't necessarily seen? And he goes, ooh, that's a good question. I want to see radar data in 4 dimensions. 3D rendering as it moves through time. I know software that does this, Gibson Ridge Analyst. It is not free, it wasn't cheap, and it's Windows desktop software. I don't like desktop software. I want to be in the browser, so that's not really helping me. But that's a good idea. I go home that night and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I bet someone else has already made this. It might not be ready to go out of the box, but I bet this already exists. Sure enough, it does. This is a way to visualize MRI imagery in 3 dimensions. This is MRI data, and even though this is a 3-dimensional demo, this underlying software supports 4D, real time. The idea is that an MRI tech or a doctor sits in front of this workstation as the patient is undergoing that procedure. And check this out. I can do all sorts of other random clever things that I have no idea what I'm actually doing here because I'm not a med student, but I have the ability to modify this visualization in real time to see things that I want to see in ways that I want to see them. If I want to see why that little chunk of brain is broken in this guy's head, I can do that. Now, this isn't the fastest computer I'm on right now, but you can't tell me this isn't cool. Imagine moving this through time. Guys, you know what this is? This is a multidimensional array of data. I have some data that's in a multidimensional array. In fact, I think this is even ZAR data, a format that we're trying to use as well. That's pretty cool, right? I got one more. And this is a really brief one, but it's another really cool one. This is a visualization someone made to visualize air traffic at the start of COVID. I hope this is coming through well enough. But you see all these little parcels fly around. These are planes. In fact, if you look at a timestamp at the bottom, that's a lot of granularity. What if this were GO's derived motion winds? What if these little dots that are moving around were wind barbs at various levels representing what that satellite sees in terms of wind motion? Heck, we could put some volumetric clouds in there and actually see how those correlate. This isn't that hard. All we need to do is find a way to get our data to work with these tools. So, okay, that's interesting.
Have you copyrighted this yet?
No, I have not copyrighted this yet. But it occurs to me that all of that exists now. It's online. It might not be ready to go for our needs, but you can't tell me that it's impossible. It's almost right there. So is this notification, almost right there. All right, so what are we going to do now? Students, this is for you. This is really for anybody because the only thing you need to get your hands dirty with this technology today is a computer with internet. We got a room full of computers with internet in our lab. Get involved. Teach yourself this stuff. You're not going to learn it in the classroom. Python is a great place to start if you want to get into programming. I would also suggest JavaScript because that's what drives a lot of those web techniques, those visualizations. Get involved. Go download WIS2 in a box. Play around with that. Figure it out. See what it can do for you. If you are, well, regardless of if you're a student or a professional, if you have some workflow that relies on weather data, look into WIS2 to see what that can do for your workflow. The data you need might not be there yet, but if you gain an understanding of it now, you will be prepared. You want to know how you stand out to professors when you go into academia? I'll give you an example. Hey, Victor, welcome to COD. Can you teach me Genpack? Can you teach me Genpack? Hey, Victor, can you teach me Genpack? I saw your website. I saw what you do with Genpack. Can you teach me Genpack? Hey, Victor, can you teach me Genpack? Fine! Do you think he said fine because I nagged him to death? No. I showed him that I was curious, that I was driven, self-motivated. I showed him that I wanted to get involved. So he took me under his wing. Do you think he regretted that? Yeah, probably. I asked a lot of questions. But we came up with an interesting workflow. He walks into my office with, hey, I got this script that visualizes some of that new Go 16 data, and it makes 3 really cool pictures. Can you take this and make 3,000 of them? Yeah, sure. Get involved. That's how you stand out. Okay, I'm past time, and I think I've screamed enough tonight. So thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm sure you've got a ton, because I really speed run through this talk.
And that's why I'm retiring. I think we just need to get whisked away.
Ah.
I got a question.
We got a question
Yeah, I do.
from Dr. Gensini.
I like the idea of WIS2. It's an API.
It's an API.
It's an API. My concern with WIS2, well, there's 2 things. I think if you remove SBN, you remove a lot of redundancy. Because right now, not only are we getting satellite data from SBN, but we're also pulling over IDD. So we're basically saying one of those methods of redundancy is going to go away. And now we're going to rely solely on an internet pipe.
You're saying remove unnecessary redundancy?
No. I'm saying if you remove SBN, you remove a potential alternative avenue to receive data into what now you're only receiving internet feed, right? So unless your weather service WFO has a good fiber pipe or great internet feed, or if we're going to do redundancy, it now has to be probably cellular as a backup versus SBN. So I'd like to hear your thought there. And then also, can WISC with the
MQTT,
can these packets manipulate? So are they only getting the metadata, or can they send a request for server-side manipulation? So for example, maybe I'm very interested in getting the GFS data, but I only want variable X, and I only want it for forecast hours 0 through 12. And I need you to subset it because your data set's too big. Can it actually issue requests back to the server side to perform some sort of computation subsetting, right? I'm thinking subsetting because the data
Yep.
set's
Yep.
right spatially way too big. And then integrate LDM into that API to actually send you the data that you need rather than an HTTPS request or something like that.
Thank you for squeezing in 3 questions to that, Victor. Let's see. Redundancy.
I'm worried about the redundancy.
So am I. And I think the Weather Services, I think NOAA is worried about the redundancy. That's why we're not hearing a lot of actionable communication from them. We're not hearing a lot of their plans to on-ramp partners yet. It's not that they're going to leave us out in the cold, it's just this is a complicated thing they're working through. Cellular, that as a technology is getting better. In fact, we're seeing cellular support on satellites now, so that technology is becoming more accessible to remote locations. Still complicating factors. Frankly, there's concern for the longevity of the SBN in other ways, like you know about 5G interference and FCC plans and what have you. I believe in the power of modern internet, and I think that we will see enough redundancy in other places that, let's be honest, we have to migrate away from that paradigm eventually. I think we'll be ready when we're ready. I'm not sure what that timeline looks like. Now, in terms of your question for subsetting data, because that's a good one, let's go back to what these topics look like. In this particular example, synoptic data, okay, aviation, experimental, whatever. Let's say this is a forecasting model. You would see something like NOAA NCEP, and then GFS, and then 850 millibar, and then temperature. So it would have the granularity down to the product, and yes, valid times, forecast times as well. So you can be notified by specific variables when they arrive.
Right, but that's accessing a very specific product at a very specific endpoint. My question is, can I
Send a request, no.
send a request for server side? So I say, I want you, where the data lives, to subset this product and then give me the result.
No, you cannot.
That is not good.
As far as I'm aware, that is not part of the WIS2 paradigm. However, there are other techno-wizardry tricks that we can use to do things like that in some places. But I agree, that's a concern that we need to do better at. I know there's a hand way over there.
Yeah,
if you
let
want
me
to
just
throw the microphone across the room.
I'll get over there. Let me just kind of make a comment. Some students who are probably being overwhelmed by this. The data volume is growing unbelievably much. Our own pipes here at COD, we're always the #1 user outside of people streaming videos. So if imagine College DuPage, all the students are out there streaming videos. That's a lot of incoming data. We have been part of this with a huge amount of outgoing data. So we have dedicated pipes to us. Imagine that you have a pipe and you're using a lot of that flow by somebody else. That's limiting your stream. So when you're talking about redundancy, we're talking about satellite is doing some of the work to give us information. We can do it local, that's simple. Getting it out to the world becomes harder and harder, and areas like Comcast and other networks are charging more and more money. Satellite has been, once we pay for it, it's free. It's been good. So the data is going up. And what Dr. Gensini is talking about here is kind of important. The data sets of the models are so huge that we can't just grab it. They're petabytes of data coming in now. So what we're trying to do for some of our models is, hey, I'm only looking for 500 millibar temperatures. That's all I want. I want a subset of the entire model. And if this is not happening, we have to grab everything, and that becomes arduous task. Plus, sorting through that data, we have to process it ourselves if we're going to generate images there. So this is a big, big topic of concern. So what Mike's talking about is really kind of glancing over what is going to be a big headache. And most of us are scratching our heads going, I don't know how we're going to deal with this. So
While he's walking over there with the mic, yeah, this is, we've got a lot of data in this industry, and this is just one part of a solution, and that solution by definition is just going to have to be very, very large. This has to be a broad, all-encompassing solution, and so I had 40 minutes to speed run through a topic that no one knows a whole lot about right now. There's other pieces of this problem that need to get solved too. But all of those pieces are on the board. All we need to do is figure out a way to put them together. Yes?
Okay, so I want to piggyback on the, I'm probably going to screw up the acronym, the SBN, the hardware,
Okay.
satellite hardware. I think yanking that out is a terrible idea. It should definitely stick around, being redundant, because you put everything on the cloud and you are now vulnerable to hackers.
Ah.
You know, what's the security on this? Because all you need is,
Okay.
you know, one hacker and you've got the world hijacked or an area.
Okay, so there are some security features built into this. First of all, these WIS2 messages come with some of those security features baked in. An MD5 checksum, a signature that ensures authenticity, so you know that it's legit. There are ways to verify that programmatically. Similarly, WIS2 in a box is great for training. You can get your hands dirty with it, but don't think that's going to let you send data up to the WMO. That ain't going to happen. So it's one of these kinds of things where you can play around with it, but you're not going to interfere with any operation. It's just you're not registered. There's a registration process for someone like NOAA to go and participate on that level, not the likes of us. That being said, in terms of security, I think we're there. Cloud providers, the big three certainly, have a lot of concern about that already. They've got some very smart people, smarter than myself, working on that problem. I'm willing to bet they've considered this. And in terms of the security of the data, there's checks for that in place as well on more of a programmatic level. It's technical. I don't necessarily see an existential hacker threat that would be alarming, at least not any more than we already have to deal with. We have public utilities that unless you are seriously air-gapped, you're going to have a bad time if someone gets to the wrong part of that. That's why some of the control facilities at nuclear power plants are not connected to the internet. That's a bad thing. But you're right, security is always a concern.
I have one clarification question for you, Mike. On WIS2, you're saying because it's here's the data, come and take it. They're sending out a push to notify you that the data is there, and then you have to respond to that by going and grabbing it, or it's not being pushed like the IDD?
Correct. It is a push service in terms of notification, but it's only information about the data. It's not pushing the data itself. Again, I really glossed over this, but a global broker is only going to manage that metadata messaging in real time. So if I'm sitting down already and want to know when new products come in, that's what that's going to do for me. If I go out for a break and come back and I want to look at the satellite imagery that came in the past hour, well, now I have to go look at historical, even if that's short term. That's where you have things like other WIS2 nodes that might serve that data, or a global cache that serves that data. There are direct tie-ins with WIS2 technology there. However, these messages are also going to point you to public sources. Maybe a cloud service, it may be a company or a .com endpoint. But here's where you can go. It's a canonical link, meaning we can trust this. We'll get that data. So yes, the metadata is pushed, but we still have to pull the data. Either way, it effectively becomes a push service. We can use it that way. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's get one more question here.
First comment and then a question. The comment is you made about remote desktop for the weather service, and you weren't sure that was the plan. I think that is the plan.
Yay!
Yeah. I'm not sure how well it's going to work. You talk about redundancy, and yeah, I'm a little worried when the entire weather service has all of its operations in the cloud and there's no local operation, and you know, that's a single point of failure. I haven't seen how that's going to be addressed. I'm sure I cross my fingers there are smart people that obviously see that.
Will not disagree with you. My goal here tonight, primarily, beyond anything else, was to bring awareness to this problem that not many people are talking about. Because I'll be real with you, I'm excited about the opportunities all of this affords. I think we're going to see the next few years something of a modernization in how we work with our data, how we visualize our data, and I think the internet's going to be a big part of that. But I can't really comment on the net effect, what that's going to feel like.
The question part of it is, do you envision a scenario where you will be kind of almost forced into the cloud, where you're not going to have big pipes coming in and out of COD, you're not going to have a room full of servers, you're going to be doing everything on the cloud yourself because that's where the data resides?
I think that day is inevitable. I don't know when that day will come, but in some ways we're already there. Think about all of the forecasting model data that currently sits on NOAA port. I'm sure you have a pretty good idea. What percentage of actual model data issued by the US do you think that actually is?
No,
It's a drop in the bucket, right? We cannot ship data around like this. We have to ship processing to the data. I think we're there in a lot of ways already, but it's not existential for us yet. I think with clever curation of data and processing, we can get away with a heck of a lot.
Yeah, I just think the paradigm of bringing data to yourself and processing it locally is probably not going to continue to be,
The one thing I'll say is that I don't think it's mutually exclusive. It's not an or. I think it's both. I think, like I said, there's got to be a bigger picture, all-encompassing solution, and I think it's going to evolve both sides of that. There's always going to be a need for on-prem something or other. There's always going to be a need for cloud-based something or other. What does that ratio look like? I don't know. But we're already kind of there. How long has the big data project been a thing? 5, 7 years at least? At least. It's been a while. And I don't think they've gotten rid of a whole lot of stuff. I will also say, though, that one thing that NOAA is worried about is data egress. They've got a lot of data moving into the cloud, and they've got arrangements with cloud providers to make that happen. Moving that data out of the cloud, that's free for you and me. We've already paid for it with our tax dollars. It's not exactly free for NOAA. And if everything's in the cloud, everything has to kind of go out of the cloud in some fashion or form that gets used. That costs money, and that is a concern.
Yeah, but the trade-off is they essentially are the only true copy of the data, and therefore they are the global now broker of the catalog, which to me is like sitting on the top of the gold mine going, I'm the only one that has this.
Devil's advocate,
So,
Nomads has to impose restrictions because too many people are getting their data and don't know how to curate their own data sets, and so they're burning down the doors trying to get all that stuff. We have to, they had no choice but to limit people in getting data. That's never a good thing, but what other choice did they have? I think that if we start going with a peer-to-peer paradigm for sharing the actual data, that would alleviate so much of the stress from the data providers themselves. So I think that has to be part of that solution too.
We're going back to the Napster days.
Do you realize that was a quarter century ago?
But it's perfect for this.
Yep, someone just felt old, I heard it.
The Napster share of weather data, I love it.
Wow.
Are you referring to when you were talking about how if Paul was connected to one network, like all of us would connect to Paul's computer as opposed to individually going to know?
Yes.
So what you really are talking about is basically dummy terminals, which is even older.
No, not quite. Not quite. Everyone's doing the same thing individually and separate. You might be looking at 2-meter temperature, you might be looking at dew point, you might be looking at CAPE, you might be looking at 500 vorticity. And then you get bored and you want to look at something else. So now you're going to look at temp, you're going to look at CAPE, you're going to look at vorticity. Are you going to get that same data from NOAA? No. Someone else in this room already looked at it. I'll get it from them instead. That's what that means.
So we could talk for long periods. So if you want to talk to Mike Moore, to Mike, not Mooring, Mike Zuranski, Moore.
Use your word,
Pizza
Paul.
and beverages, is that the cost of talking to you?
Pizza and beverages.
I think that might be the case.
I also accept bribes in the form of steak too.
Let's thank Mike one more time.
Question.
Thank you, guys.
Everyone gets that.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
My head hurts.